2016, that was the death of Philando Castile. And that is what triggered me to start actually writing stuff to combat different narratives just on Facebook when Facebook wasn't full of ads all the time. I wrote a couple of, you could call them op-eds, but they were just Facebook posts. I was 19, writing about the Black Panthers, writing about the FBI crime statistics and how those are manipulated in talking points to justify our murder by the state. And then from there, following the elections, 2016 was my first election to vote in. And that's when I was introduced to social democracy, the sort of top of the iceberg of socialism that intrigued me, and I just followed along. That's where my enjoyment of politics came from.
While we're at it, we're going to get to our guest for today. He is an author, writes articles on Substack. He is also a graduate and an amazing person, somebody who is extremely brilliant, is involved in community action in the Orlando chapter of RBN, and really just a chill dude to talk to. I have KD Lewis joining me today. So good to have you finally on the channel, KD. My brother, good to see you.
Brother, it's good to see you too.
So one of the things that I wanted to get into and ask you in regards to the work that you're doing is, how in the hell did you get into this? Because the thing is that when we met, it had to be, what was it, in September we met? I think.
Whenever that first meet and greet was.
No, it was in August. We had met in August, and when we met, I had no idea you were coming. I had no idea that you would be there. And then it was me and one of the first members that were there. Shout out to you, Sabiha. And you came in and you were like, "Is this the meeting?" And we were like, "Yeah." So I wasn't expecting you. So how was that first meeting felt like?
The first meeting I'm very glad that I was able to go. Like I told you before, I was a little nervous when the opportunity came up, but I knew I wanted to be involved in the sense that you and RBN were doing work, and so I came in, and when I saw you and Sabiha, and we sat and we talked for 5, 6 hours. I don't even remember how long we were talking, but it felt like I finally found a genuine community that I felt like I was lacking, with me living kind of on my own, and sort of my own political thoughts are a little bit more, I wouldn't say obscure, but just farther down the line than many other people that I interact with. So finding the community with you guys was a true blessing.
So, and thank you very much for those kind words. So what prompted you to get into activism? Because a lot of people who may be watching this channel, some people who are new to watching this channel, they may be feeling like, well, what is the first thing you do when you want to dive into this? What drove you? What was the main driving force to push you into doing this type of work?
So without trying to sound super long-winded, I want to go answer the question that I remember seeing on Twitter a lot, which is, what was the thing that initially radicalized you?
Sure.
And for me, that was when I was 15, and it was the murder of Trayvon Martin, and that was the first time. I was 15; he was killed at 17. It was the first time I really saw, or got past the blinders or the veneer of a somewhat post-racial United States, when I saw my own classmates, my own teammates that I was involved in sports, like really fall for the mud that was thrown on that kid's name. And when the verdict of his murderer was found not guilty, they were yeah, they were like, oh, I mean, yeah, sure, you shouldn't be a thug. And I that point is what sort of triggered me into having a more political view on just anything.
Yeah.
And from there, it just sort of expanded. Going into college, I was very heavy with not being anti-cop at the time, but I was very much, I wasn't pro-police, especially in 2016. That was the death of Philando Castile. And that is what triggered me to start actually writing stuff to combat different narratives just on Facebook when you know, Facebook wasn't full of ads all the time. I wrote a couple of, you could call them op-eds, but they were just Facebook posts. I was 19, writing about the Black Panthers, writing about the FBI crime statistics and how those are manipulated in talking points to justify our murder by the state. And then from there, following the elections, I mean, 2016 was my first election to vote in. And that's when I was introduced to social democracy, the sort of top of the iceberg of socialism that intrigued me, and I just followed along. That's where my enjoyment of politics came from. And it's a little embarrassing to say, but my true introduction into the left was through Secular Talk. Good old Ken and Barbie. But as that time went on, and I would see electoral politics just seem to fumble to secure any sort of real gains for, you know, people like me. It wasn't until this very recent last presidential election that I was almost just done. I was done with all politics. I had given up any sort of hope of change. But that's when I sort of expanded my view more, and lo and behold, I came across you guys, and you guys sparked a new sense of political avenue that I could go around, and so I followed the minds that you guys have mentioned. I was already a big fan of the Black Panthers, but I started to learn more about like Kwame Ture, more about where Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were headed before they were assassinated. And then I think when I finally got in touch with community between you guys at the Orlando RBN chapter, it sort of just solidified me on this path of activism. And now with writing, I could take that to another level that I never even imagined I could be able to do when I lost hope back in 2020. So, I mean, I had a time where I gave up, but I found a light somewhere. That light was RBN, and now I'm here.
Wow. Thank you so very much for recounting that. Just as far as you mentioned writing, you spoke about before how you actually really like writing, back in your days in college and in high school. So you talked about how you really enjoyed that. Can you give us a glimpse of what sparked you back into doing the writing again? What reignited that passion and propelled you to purpose?
I think when I was when I was writing what became my first article, the titled "Black Political Power," and analyzing the our Black misleadership. As I was just writing, I was really just ranting a little bit. But then, as I was writing, and I was just in a zone, and it just sparked that excitement, that passion. It just came from me wanting to rant at first. And speaking wise, I wouldn't say I'm the best orator in regards to being confrontational or handling confrontation, but with writing, and I could put out all my thoughts, put them together, edit them, and make them clear and concise. That's why I chose writing as a route. And then just as I'm typing out this op-ed, I'm like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Like, I just end up doing this more.
So you mentioned your writing, and so you introduced me to some of your writing, and I would like to go to your Substack here. One of the first article that you wrote was about Black political power, the evolution of Black political leadership, and then so you go into the genesis of the Black liberation movement starting in the 50s, which you put here, and you talk about what we call the Black Boule. And so I'll just read this first sentence. It says, the fight for civil rights has existed since the fall of the Reconstruction era. However, the actual movement commemorated every February contained prominent leaders who were members of the Black Boule, such as the most invoked leader of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can give some of the audience the definition of Black Boule, or your definition of what Black Boule is, because there are maybe some people who are not as educated on that term.
Yeah. So the simplest way to put it is that the Black Boule is basically a Black elite circle. It could be the members of the Freemasons. And I mentioned later, there's something I referred to as the offspring of the Black Boule, and that is referred to some of the National Panhellenic Council, or the Divine Nine, that some people may know about. But basically, it's a circle of Black elitism around the same area of they're not quite the Black bourgeois, because the bourgeois represents sort of a different class in station. And of course, with Martin Luther King, he wasn't a billionaire, but he was of those high societies.
Okay. So could this also be indicative of people who are, for instance, within the Congressional Black Caucus, people like that? You have people, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name, Jim Clyburn, people like that. Could that also be part of the Black Boule, so to speak, or the modern day version of that?
Yeah, well, Jim Clyburn is actually a member of the same frat that I'm a part of.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, he's part of that type of inner circle.
Okay, all right. And so one of the things that you actually talked about, and I love when you brought this up. It says you talked about the political actions that were done by people who are in these different organizations. Now, just as an aside, Kwame Ture actually spoke of the need for all of us to be part of different organizations so that we can organize around doing actions to improve our community, which is what people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Assata Shakur, Angela Davis, and many others have been a part of. And in here, you says these actions include sit-ins, marches, and boycotts that disrupted the flow of society and exposed the Black morality within our leaders and a large number of hate-filled subjects of an adolescent empire to the rest of the country. These offensive endeavors would lead to legislative wins mentioned earlier. Coupled with these actions were more defensive activities, most notable being the 35-plus survival programs of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. These programs protected many Black people in the country from police, lack of healthcare, lack of education, lack of food. One major accomplishment was forcing Congress to enact a permanent nationwide free breakfast program in 1975. So you bring about the historical context regarding what true Black leadership can bring about.
Mhm.
And so how does this translate to the actions that you try to do on the ground at present? Because you are, for all intents and purposes, a member of Gen Z, right?
Yep.
So how does this translate to the actions that you try to do on the ground?
So what I usually, I'm sorry, how I was able to sort of translate that is taking the understanding that we have to be able to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time as we do all these other things out here that, these started Black businesses, these getting these Black people in high places. I feel like there was a large abandonment of on the ground movements, especially like the Black Panthers. After the 1980s, those were organizations of that caliber were non-existent. So for someone of my generation, I see a lot from the college perspective. A lot of us are in the other half of that realm that are doing sort of the Black excellence, but without the ground movements and actually challenging the power that the Black excellence would actually be surrounded behind. So what I took from that understanding of history is that you need all fronts covered. And so what I try to do on the ground is the mutual aid and educating of what that is and where that comes from. I essentially my goal is to make socialism not scary to the aspiring upper echelon of Black people. Mm-hmm. If that answers the question, but yeah.
Yeah. What is Black excellence in your view?
Black excellence has always been to me high achievement, things that we get praised for. The first Black I'm trying to think of like just anything of sort of a high attainment that was once sort of not available for a lot of us to have, such as owning a lot of businesses. I think when people think of Black excellence, they'll point to somewhere like Atlanta with a lot of Black businesses, a lot of Black wealth. So that's where I think Black excellence has been sort of catered around. It's something, it's something that's good to be praised, especially with the how our image is perversed in our society now. So it's good to see these things that are basically the opposite of what the media presents us to be. But I feel like it just stopped at the representation of doing something very well or not, or breaking a sort of a statistic or stereotype for our race.
Yeah. I it's not missed upon me that, and maybe I'll get in trouble for this, but it feels like to me in the Black community that Black excellence is usually just a phrase used to praise Black capitalism. When I think of Black excellence, I think of the people who have been trying to dismantle a system where a lot of Black people feel like they have to succeed in order to be accepted.
Mm.
For instance, people like Kwame Ture, to me, is Black excellence, right? People like Fred Hampton, or people, Black excellence could be Nat Turner. And the thing is like, why would he be considered Black excellence? Well, because he fought against oppression. Never mind the fact that, you know, a lot of people back then considered him to be what people would call today a terrorist.
Yep.
Because he literally fought against oppression. And so when it comes to Black excellence, are we doing it within the confines of, you know, no offense to anybody watching, but to be like the successful white people who are constantly, you know, using their power to uh, using their power to put people under their thumb, as far as, or, you know, extract their wealth. You know what I mean? The wealth that they
Mm-hmm.
create. So are we trying to be more like them, or are we trying to be more like somebody who pushes for change so that everyone has the material needs that every human being should have?
So
Uh,
I genuinely believe that the latter is what I think more people, you know, aspire to do when we take these the Black excellence route. Is not, I don't think a majority of people who want to be, um, you know, the Black business owner, the black owner of just anything they could say, yeah, this is Black owned. I don't think it's there's a motivation of sort of copying the white supremacist system.
mm-hmm.
It's just going this route is it works in antithesis to the social justice that I believe a lot of Black people want to see.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't think many Black capitalists are capitalists out of malice, but it's sort of, they want to believe that that we can be those, like those mogul empires,
Mm-hmm.
and have that and praise that, but we can also protect our most vulnerable. Those things can't work together.
Yeah. It's just, it feels like kind of a catch-22 in that way, right? Like, I want to be able to have a business, but at the same time, and I want to fight against the social injustice, but at the same time, I have to play ball within a system, because this feels like the only game in town. You know, that's what it kind of feels like, you know. So thank you very much for that. I want to get back to another portion that you have wrote, another article. And this one was, it felt like a labor of love. In this one, it's entitled "Thank You for Your Service." Updated. It says how the military industrial complex exploits the goodwill and image of U.S. service members at the expense of American citizens and global security. I'm going to be honest with you. This is actually one of my favorite articles that you actually wrote.
It's definitely
And
one of my top ones.
yeah, definitely. So what inspired you to write this?
So after Veterans Day, I see a lot. I come from a family of veterans. My father, I said in the article, my father served 27 years in the Marine Corps.
Wow.
So all I knew growing up were mainly Black military people. And
Gotcha.
of course, after leaving college, there's a lot of friends that are in the military. And I always, and you know, I'm not in the military, but I do work with the military, with my job. So it really was a very personal article in that sense. Everyone is saying, "Oh, you know, happy Veterans Day." We thank our veterans for the work they do, and I was just thinking of the story that Sabiha had told us about one of the patients of Vietnam, the VA, and how he basically said, "Please do not thank me for my service because of what he did over there."
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know what the people that in my life, what everything they do. I don't know what their involvement was in, but either way, when I saw just a lot of gratitude for the veterans with my knowledge of how we work on a foreign policy level and how everything that is projected onto the military as something that just automatically deserves reverence, it's not reality. So that article was personal because I don't want to shame anybody for serving. Like, everyone has their reasons for joining. Everyone has their reasons for staying. Everyone does different things that may have a direct impact on a lot of death, and some that is so obscure they don't even touch that stuff. But I think the reverence behind the military service, I think it comes from what people gain personally from the military service. Like the life that me and my family was able to have due to my father's service was something that was very much above average compared to many other Black Americans. Yeah. And so I get the gratitude for the life that you can get from the military, but it's sort of like at what cost. And then I wanted to bring home in the article that the positive things we gain from military service, which isn't just a sort of more just economically taken care of. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's definitely better than the average American. I think I put in there that even non-military members like myself, if I were to have a kid, then I am entitled to 12 weeks of paternity leave.
Yeah.
That's something that many Americans don't get. And so I wanted people to get that the positive things we gain from military service should not be given to us at the expense of the type of service the military is basically globally known for doing at this point.
Yeah. In fact, you actually touched on it here. It says, for many Black families with households tied to military service, my family included, military service is both a pipeline for long-term financial stability and the stepping stone to reach the upper echelon of society. The Institute of Family Studies asserts that Black men who have served in the military have almost a 10% greater chance of reaching the middle class or higher compared to those who do not serve. This result of increased access of upward mobility makes sense. Service members are afforded opportunities and benefits that essentially remove socioeconomic barriers the average Black American is susceptible to encounter. The ability to go to college for free or receive forgiveness of student loans accrued prior to military service are just a couple of examples of benefits gained via service. And it says these benefits are not limited to the military members, but also include their dependents, spouses, and children. And the only thing one must exchange for this life is their body and national loyalty. So, you know, a lot of people say, well, should we be afforded that simply by going into the military, or because some of these things I personally see as a right and not something that should just be done through military service? What say you?
Well, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Even like when college was free at a point, And now, in order for many people, if you don't have the money to go and you're not blessed enough to get a scholarship, you have to take out a loan, and paying that back has been a major pain. There are people right now that have been working in public schools that have been paying their loans for decades that are luckily getting some of their debts forgiven now, but paying that over decades at a time is sort of, I mean, I'd rather not have to pay it. And so that's where the military incentive comes in. But when that was already allowed to us, it to me, it doesn't make sense to take that away. And now, in order to have that access, you either have to be lucky to be born rich, lucky to get a scholarship, or you put on them boots, or put on them boots after you graduate. And I don't think that's I don't think that's a proper way to distribute care to people. Like, in exchange for care, you gotta go fight overseas.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that the benefits that a lot of the military get should be universal among all citizens, not just people in the military. And if that is not an incentive to join the military, if honor for wanting to protect your country is not good enough, then maybe we should change how the military operates and make it more above board, more honorable, right? Especially in regards to our foreign policy. Because the thing is that if you need to lure in people with free healthcare, free housing, free college, because if you were to give that all away to all the citizens, then they wouldn't join the military, then it's because they see something wrong with the military. So now you have to draw them in with that in order for them to serve. So it's like, because if you were to actually give it all, but then people would still willingly want to fight in the military, then that means that they see something good for what we're doing.
Right.
You know? There's something that you also bring out here, which I think is actually very interesting. And it shows how you care for service members here in this article. It says, the final belief that our freedoms are protected by our military is undermined by the actions of our politicians, bureaucratic leaders, and neoliberal leaders in academia. The greatest threat to our celebrated freedoms, notably speech and bodily autonomy, are our own heads of state. You give an example. It says in Florida, where we live, Governor Ron DeSantis calls to ban pro-Palestinian groups from Florida colleges in the name of fighting anti-Semitism, as well as signing into the law the elimination of being able to protest around the residence of public officials, both clear and violations of our First Amendment right. We also have to acknowledge the blacklisting and doxing efforts of our liberal academic elite from institutions such as Harvard University and the students of this institution for the same reason DeSantis cites his ban on pro-Palestinian groups. This is textbook fascism. And I find this really heartening, because one of the things you're saying is basically the biggest risk to the safety of really our military are the heads of state that put them in harm's way. The biggest risk to our constitutional freedoms that we enjoy are a lot of these heads of state that are really owned by the corporations. So really, these big corporations are really the most danger to our service members. The biggest risk to our safety as far as our amendment rights, our unalienable rights, are really the corporations that actually own our government. So if you can speak to that just a little bit too as well.
Yeah. It's sort of like every time I would hear, the troops are over there fighting for my freedom. Oh, I fight for you to be able to say F the government. Oh, I fight for you to do it. But it's like the threat of that freedom isn't coming from the people that you're being sent to kill. or at best monitor, but the people that work under the military. Like, say if Ron DeSantis were to experience a protest akin to what Trump was experiencing for George Floyd, and he turned the Coast Guard, I think, onto the protesters and shot them with tear gas. That's where he took that picture of the Bible or whatever. But that was him using the military that's supposed to protect our freedoms against us. And who's to say that Ron DeSantis couldn't do? He can't. I don't think he can control the U.S. military. But it's sort of in the same vein. If something were to go wrong per se, then it would be the cops and military coming in to diffuse the response of the oppressed, because that's who they will be used to suppress the oppressed group. And so it's a very it's kind of a sick twist of just adding more reverence to the service while ignoring that part doesn't. There's no correlation between that and our freedoms, but yet we've been conditioned to believe military exists to protect our freedoms. That's it. But our freedoms aren't being harmed by, again, the people that the military is pointed at. It's being harmed by the people who are doing the pointing.
Yeah. And it's the orders that they're giving to our service members, which I feel is disgusting. So you're going to direct people of the National Guard to suppress people's free speech rights when they're really there to protect our freedoms, not suppress it. And so for anybody giving that order, it's really a slap in the face to the service members that you are literally ordering. So that's what it feels like to me. So I wanted to also direct this. And I love the way you end this. It says, and as a community of families, many of the relationships between service members and their families are a gleaming reflection of the golden rule, loving your neighbor as you do yourself. They look out for each other and operate as extended family members, unconditionally catering to the needs of each other when necessary. My challenge to us as personal beneficiaries of military service is to love our people and ourselves enough to demand this be the reality for millions of Black Americans and Americans of all backgrounds without the condition of serving the imperialist motives of the ruling class. Currently, our loved ones sacrifice their lives for a government content with overseeing the suffering of its citizens and contributing to the destruction of the world for the sake of capital and central power. So really, you're doing a call to action for us to treat everyone the same way that military families are treated.
Yes, everyone deserves that respect. Everyone deserves that. They deserve the right to live. And what you gain from the military service is a better chance of making a living and thriving. And that's something that I think should be a right to everyone.
That's beautiful, Cam. I appreciate that. And so that's one of my personal favorite articles by you. There was another one that you had recently wrote about the Congo, which I think is also brilliantly written. This also gives historical context. A lot of people are talking about what's going on in Palestine, and especially more specifically what's going on in Gaza. But a lot of people are now starting to direct their attention to what's going on in Congo, especially in the recent knowledge of the mining of coltan, cobalt, diamonds, gold, and what have you. And so the blurb says how imperialism and capitalism destroyed the heart of Africa. And you go in to talk about really what I would like to call an African Holocaust. So you talk about King Leopold II, who is, in my opinion, If you wanted to measure, murder for murder, he is as bad, or if not worse, than Adolf Hitler.
No, he's worse.
And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said he's worse.
Yeah. 10 plus million Congolese that were murdered by King Leopold II. And so you go into what he did, and can you speak about the connection between what happened to the Congolese people under King Leopold and the connection between that and the imperialism and colonialism and what we see going on in Gaza?
Hmm. So the biggest tie between what's been happening in the Congo from King Leopold's entrance and the colonial settler project that is Israel against Gaza and Palestinians there's a resource motivation in there with the Congo. The Congo was very heavy with, I believe, rubber was the larger of what King Leopold was
Yes.
exporting, and you know back when European imperialism and colonialism was acceptable on a world stage, he was able to easily do that. He was able to go in. He tricked a lot of the Congolese chiefs through a journalist that did an expedition through Africa, like who got to know these chiefs. King Leopold used him. He happily was also used to trick these chiefs into basically turning over land to King Leopold, and and he had that resource right at his fingertips, and dehumanizing the subjects there to get the resource. I mean, that's light work to put it that way. It was not hard for him to do that. With Israel, I believe there's the canal near the Suez Canal, if
Yeah.
remember correctly. So
Yes.
yeah, that is a if Israel has control over that region entirely, and with Israel being a friend to the United States, I mean, it's sort of the same thing. That's easy access from a region via proxy of a settler colonial project sponsored by us. With And so yeah, that's where those commonalities are there. Nope. You there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. I think my internet went out just for a second. But of course, this is why we need municipal broadband now, people. But yes, either that or it was the CIA. You never know. Yeah. So, but as far as what's going on as well in Congo, one of the things that I wanted to speak about also is the connection, and I actually talked about how it's all connected. Like even the diamond trade, the diamond mining that's going on in Congo, that's actually being done by Israeli companies that are mining the diamonds, and in keeping the diamond trade, they are, artificially inflating the price of diamonds, even though diamonds are not rare. Diamonds are extremely plentiful. And so in order to make as much money, it has to be, spoken about, and it's made to seem like it's more rare. So therefore they can make more money. And so, for instance, just like all the things that you used that were rubber, back in the early 1900s, that contributed to what was going on in Congo, to in February, when people are buying diamond rings for their loved ones, that is being inflated, and those have been mined by the Congolese to our very phones, laptops, cars, and planes that use the cobalt and coltan in our very devices. Everything leads back to settler colonialism that includes Israel, that includes the United States, and includes countries like France, Belgium, the UK. These things are constantly, we're constantly using these things that are a product of these imperialist actions that are being done abroad. And it's heartbreaking. But one of the things I am heartened by is a lot of people are now talking about not buying another phone until the one you have falls off the wheels, so to speak, So I really love that. One of the things that I also wanted to touch on was further in the article where, let me see, where was I at? Oh, you talked about the imperialism where they actually assassinated a lot of the leaders like Patrice Lumumba in places like Congo. And so if you can discuss that, like, why don't we have another Patrice Lumumba in Congo right now?
Well, that could possibly be to the sort of the other guy that was elected with Patrice Lumumba, which was President Joseph Kasavubu. Kasavubu was not a heavy fan of full Congo independence. I'm not quite sure why, but he wasn't. Whereas what Patrice Lumumba wanted to do was make the Congo its own independent nation, not just this is the nation of Congo, but in terms of nationalizing their resources, everything would be within their control, and that was what Patrice Lumumba wanted. And when the mutiny had happened, following his rise into power, it was the country was just in a lot of disarray, and the UN did sort of come in to try to mitigate what was going on, but they weren't paying attention to every single aspect of where things were falling apart. And of course, Patrice reached out to the Soviet Union just for help, and he got the help. But with someone that is not afraid of dealing with, at the time, the U.S.'s or capitalism's biggest enemy, which is communist, the Soviet Union. Having someone like him there with his aspirations and his dealing with the Soviet Union, like, oh, he's got to go. And so you have Joseph Kasavubu, who dismissed him from his seat, and then you had Joseph Mobutu, who was I think a colonel in the Congolese army that was again happily used by the United States, the CIA specifically, to take Patrice Lumumba, and with him and the region, which I believe is called Katanga, that was against Lumumba, they had an open execution of him. And after that, with their vacuum now, the CIA backed a coup that was led by Joseph Mobutu against Joseph Kasavubu. I don't know why, with someone like Joseph that I guess was willing to play ball, but when he had someone like Mobutu who was staunchly anti-communist, I mean, that's where that happened. And then because he wasn't ruling from an actual standpoint of the betterment of his nation, he would be in power from like 1965 all the way till 1997, and that's 30 years of a basically a U.S. puppet in charge of that area.
Mhm.
Then after he leaves, there's another sort of dictator like leader that follows, and at that point, once the economy is in shambles the way the Congo was, it's kind of like no matter how good natured a leader coming into it would be, it's almost past the point of return. And
Yeah.
and now, given the state of the Congo, it's a gold mine for corporations, especially electronic companies. It's a gold mine. There is, if we were to fix the Congo, grant them not grant them, but they take the right of their resources, then these companies, they can't profit as much as they can right now. And I think I put in the article, like, it is an incentive to keep the Congo that way. And so that's why I don't even think there's even a heavy push globally. I mean, there are, of course, the global South and allies that are against oppression, but the ones with the I guess the biggest, heaviest hitters, they benefit from the state of the Congo, and they'll probably do what they can to keep it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's more worth to them to keep it destabilized than it is to keep it stabilized, because if it's destabilized, especially right now, what's going on with the M23 gang, which is really, being pushed by Rwanda and Uganda. And on top of that, Rwanda and Uganda are both U.S.-backed regimes that, in the region. So
they were also they're also heavily involved with the coltan trade during coltan fever. It was those countries, as well as militants within the Congo, that were exploiting those mines like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just goes to show, if you keep it destabilized, then that means that's land that's not owned. If it's land that's not owned, you can take it for free without ever having to pay anything out, without ever having to compensate the people who are on that land, without even having a fight from people on that land. So therefore, it's free and clear, and then you get to mine it, and then you get to pay the people who are mining it starvation wages, basically as slave wages, and then you get it for cheap, and then you get to sell it back to people like yourself and me in the form of electronics. So that's basically how the game is played, and people need to peep game, especially how imperialism is done. So there's another one that you wrote called The Value of Voting. This one was great because
this one was actually my favorite. This one's actually my favorite one that I did.
So please explain to me how voting third party is going to vote for Trump.
So I'm of the belief that it's not. A vote for a third party candidate is a vote for a third party candidate. It's kind of depressing how we've taken how we gained that right to vote in 1965, and how we have today is if and we're practicing in this cycle of misery at this point. We have this illusion of choice, and it's also an illusion of options too. People have literally just automatically accept that, okay, either he's going to win or he's going to win. Therefore, if you were to break away from one of those two, because the electoral system isn't advantageous for someone like those people to win, they count it as taking away votes from one of the two. But that's based off the assumption that if those options were there, or if those people weren't voting those options, that they actually would just come out and vote, when likely they just wouldn't show up and vote at all. And that I can't accept the talking point that a vote for a third party for the Democrats is a vote for Trump. It's not. I didn't vote for Trump. The person who voted for third party didn't vote for Trump. The person who voted for Trump was the person who voted for Trump. It's sort of like we've a lot of good-willed, liberal-minded people, which are a lot of people in my circle. They just sort of they've been kind of, I would say, they've been beaten down by this process that we call a democracy, an election, and electoral politics, that they sort of given up any sort of political imagination that goes outside of, we got to vote red or we got to vote blue to stop red from winning. So sorry for the long-windedness, but no, I don't think a vote for third party is a vote for Trump.
It's interesting because there is a part in the article where you talk about the legislation of single-payer healthcare. It says legislation like single-payer healthcare as of 2021 is supported by 70% of Americans and a whopping 87% of Democratic voters. Yet when there was a Democratic majority in Congress, this bill wouldn't even be brought to a vote in the Dem-dominated House of Representatives. And even if the Senate was filibuster approved, the legislation would have been vetoed by a Democratic president per his own words. And if anybody remembers, those words that were spoken of were by Joe Biden when he was on The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell and said that if Medicare for All actually reached his desk, he would veto it, even if it was approved by a Senate and a House. And so moving down to this part, and you hit the nail on the head. It says, how could this be the case in a functioning democracy? It is quite simple. Our system is not a democracy, but an oligarchy, with most of our elected officials, at least on a national level, beholden to the corporate donors and lobbyists. According to Open Secrets, 130 insurance political action committees would donate over $11 million and $13 million to Democrats and Republican candidates, respectively, just from the last election cycle in 2022. So you're speaking about the value of voting. And really, if we're going to talk about, for instance, and I think we had this conversation a little bit earlier, via text message, was that you get a lot of people who will say, but Cam, they passed legislation on this good progressive thing this year. What do you want them to do? And remember the analogy I gave earlier?
No, run it back again. The analogy.
Yeah. So a lot of times people will say, like, for instance, let's say hypothetically, in the House, they vote to cancel student loan debt, right? Even though it can be signed by President Biden, it can be done by him through executive order through the Department of Education, or he can do it through the Higher Education Act. Let's just put all that to the side, right? Let's say this is just a legislative thing that's being done in the House. But then who runs the House? House is being
right now, the Republicans.
Yeah. So if somebody says, well, they introduced it to the House, but they got voted down by Republicans, but the Democrats are trying to do good things, what would you say to somebody who says, well, they're still trying to do good things, so we might as well just vote for them?
I will say that please don't fall for the illusion of choice and difference. This bill that recently, the bill that we were talking about, the to prevent hedge fund owners from buying homes, and they would also have to relinquish ownership of homes. That was introduced in the House by the Democrats this year. But the problem with hedge funds buying property has been since well before 2008, and even after 2008, they still were doing that. And this problem of people being able to buy homes because they were being bought up by these larger companies and hedge funds, that existed back when Trump was in charge and back in the beginning of Biden's presidency, and yet they waited until they had no control over Congress to introduce this. And it makes you think, like, why would they do that if they actually wanted to get something done? And it's sort of like you got to actually look at this not just in the lens of that's a good thing that they're introducing, but you got to take everything into account. Like, what is the political atmosphere right now? What's the body of the legislative branch right now? Who's in charge? You have to take all those into account before you just sort of look at something and think of it as, oh, that's great. That's why we should vote for them. In fact, I would take this as like, you should be insulted that they think they can trick you into thinking that they're good by intentionally sabotaging themselves at this point. Like, bringing up a bill that you know is going to fail in a Congress that you don't have a majority control over. It's at that point you're virtue signaling, and we don't have time for virtue signaling. Like, we need results.
Mm-hmm. This actually is what you were referring to. It says a bill in Congress to stop hedge funds from owning U.S. single-family homes. And so let me just play this really quick as well so that people get, and this actually, and then this adds context, and then I can give my analogy.
You know, it can seem like an impossible task at times.
Home buyers are running into a new challenge when making an offer in this hot housing market.
And my offer was declined.
Now we know who's buying up a majority of those homes. If you're trying to find a house in today's market, you know, it can seem like an impossible task at times.
Home buyers are.
So basically, you know, it's to stop people, these hedge funds, from buying these homes. And when people say, but JB and Kim, you know, they're doing good things. I'm going to read my analogy that I said to you. And because I think it's worth noting that a lot of people who vouch for Democrats don't see this happen, or they feels like they don't detect it. It kind of feels like their bullshit-o-meter is kind of broken.
I would say that the GOP is great at instilling fear into its opponents, and I think they're like that for a reason. So well, I do think that when people sort of their blinders are on, their earmuffs are on, it's because there is a very obvious enemy in the GOP. And back when we were talking about, you know, why, you know, voting for third party is a vote for Trump, is people just automatically view Republican is the bad guy. Democrats are the only other party that could be in opposition for them. Therefore, to stop the badness of the GOP, we have to let the badness from the Dems slide, because they aren't explicitly advocating for our demise the same way that the GOP tends to do.
Yeah. And so for anybody who goes, well, they did good, they passed some good legislation. And a lot of times that good legislation, and it may very well be good, but they always tend to pass it when it's a Republican-controlled House or a Republican-controlled Senate or a Republican-controlled president. And it's like, it always seems convenient that whenever they do the really good stuff is when the Republicans have control. So this is what it's like. So pardon me for a second. It's kind of like moving a sofa. If I don't want to move the sofa, but I don't want you to know that I don't want to move the sofa, I'll wait until it's a rainy day to make the attempt, but then say, Sorry, I can't move the sofa because it's raining. Every time it's dry outside, I make excuses to why I can't move the sofa. So I only wait until it rains to make the attempt. So rainy days are Republican controlled House, Senate, White House. Either or all of the above, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dry days are when everything's going and you have a Democrat controlled House, Senate, or White House, or all the above. And then a lot of times when it's dry outside and you can move that sofa, you're like, can't do it. Sorry, my back. I'm sorry. It's just not feeling good today. Or, oh man, I smashed my finger in the door the other day, so I can't lift these. I can't do it. And so there's always an excuse. It's just like, for instance, what did Obama say in 2008? I know you were young back then. But what did Obama say back in 2008 on the campaign trail? He said that we are going to codify Roe v. Wade into law first thing as soon as I get into office. Cam, what happened?
Well, it looks like Roe v. Wade has been overturned in 2020, 23? What was it? So that didn't happen.
So look in here. And then what happened when they came back to Obama and said, didn't you say that you were going to codify Roe v. Wade into law? Well, that's not much of a priority.
Yeah.
That's not a priority. Even though it was a dry, sunny day, they had a Democrat president, a majority in the House, and a super majority in the Senate.
Filibuster proof.
Filibuster proof. And see what they did? It was a dry day. They could have moved the sofa. In fact, not only could they have moved the sofa, but they even had a furniture dolly to move it. And they didn't. Now, let's go to 20. Democrat president, Democrat House, Democrat Senate, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could have gotten health care for all. In fact, we were in the middle of a pandemic. Section 1881 of the Social Security Act means that the President of the United States actually has the power to give everybody across the nation health care in an emergency. And did Biden do it?
Can you hear my dog in the background? Is it too loud?
A little bit, yeah.
All right. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. We like dogs around here. But could we have given everybody health care in 2020?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have even meant legislation. He could have used emergency powers. Right?
Yeah.
That would have been an easy lift for the squad, for the progressives. They could have said it on the House floor. They could have called a press conference and say, hey, the president could actually give everybody health care right now.
There's a lot that they could have done. And it goes to show that this plan to take over the Democratic Party was a fool's errand, and it's not something that's capable of happening. Now, I did have a friend of mine pose the question, like, well, I mean, why would that be the case if, MAGA and the Tea Party just were able to overtake the Republican Party? Like they took over. And to answer that is because the Tea Party and MAGA doesn't have any sense of opposition to empire and capitalism. They could just be wild, speak as if they're anti-establishment while still, doing their bidding. They're just, they have taken over the image, I would say, of the Republican Party as well as the base. But they were able to do so because it was a challenge of decorum. It didn't have anything to do with really policy that was against what regular Republicans were doing. Whereas with the Democrats, And what the Justice Democrats were supposed to do, the Justice Democrats were supposed to pull the Democratic Party back to the left, which would be going against empire and capitalism. And since both Republicans and Democrats serve the same people, serve empire and capital, a left taking over the Democratic Party is not comparable to an extreme right taking over an already right-wing sector of our political system.
Yeah. And whenever I talk about the ratchet effect, a lot of people know what the ratchet effect is when the Democratic Party is in power, they do not allow anything to move to the left, but they always concede to the right. And once they concede to the right, they go further right. So the Democratic Party of yesteryear, the Democratic Party of the 80s is further to the left than the Democratic Party of today. And we always continuously cede to the right. And we cede not just more to the right, but we cede more to the corporations, which was brought out beautifully in your article. So there is another one that you talked about with the trouble in Black America. Says discussing the Atlantan deacon sentenced to death by an Atlanta Police Department officer and how the leadership of Atlanta will ensure the continuance of death by law enforcement. I just want to go over this really quickly. I actually talked about this about Johnny Hallman, about him being tased to death by a police officer, and how can you talk about the connection between this and the leadership, the Black leadership in Atlanta, as well as the building of Cop City? Can you connect those dots for us?
Yeah. So first, it's insane that this man was killed for not signing a ticket. I'm not sure. I'm not police, so I don't get the training that police get. But I don't know what will make someone think that a logical progression from someone refusing that type of order is murder, be it intentional or not. But that goes into the connection of what we will expect to see in Cop City, the development of that, because Cop City, and as a lot of us know, a lot of state police departments, they do training with the Israeli Defense Forces in Israel, and we've seen how the IDF treats those that they're occupying. And those are just reflected. I don't know what came first, chicken or the egg, who taught who, but it's their tactics in dealing with an occupied population are essentially the same. You respect my authority regardless of how I present it to you, regardless of what you have going on. If you do not respect this authority, I could potentially get away with killing you.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what will be spread out when this type of facility that is teaching military tactics to these cops here, that they're teaching this facility is to train cops to be even more militant than they already are. And how I would connect that to the leadership of Atlanta is that Atlanta's leadership is almost 100% Black. And like we said earlier, Atlanta itself is the number one spot for Black businesses, which is a big thing that a lot of the Black excellence group praises and wants to see more of, which is Black businesses. And has the most, like I said, one of the most rich Black people there. So you would think that this would be a bastion for a Black paradise. It's basically a modern day Tulsa, Oklahoma. And yet the economic way of living in Atlanta for Black people
Mm-hmm.
is sort of it contradicts the paradise face of it. I believe the sort of agreed upon standard of living for one person to stay in a bedroom would be about a little over $60,000 a year for a one bedroom apartment. The median Black wealth, which is median income, is a better accurate detector of where a population's sort of money is stacked around versus average. And the median Black income is $20,000 lower than the standard than the cost of living there.
Yeah.
But then people will bring, oh well, this new mayor, even though he, as well as the Black mayor before him and the Black mayor before her, were very big on pushing this the Cop City into fruition. People point out, oh well, he's doing stuff for affordable housing. Well, affordable housing, in order for one to even qualify, they'd have to make half of the median income of the entire area. And the entire area's median income is $40K. So you have to be making around $20K to qualify for affordable housing. And even so, there's to build new homes is kind of I'm not quite sure the capitalist connection between being able to do those, how that's beneficial in that sense. But there's already like 30,000 plus empty homes and vacant homes in Atlanta. But when you have something up to where the cost of living is 20,000 more than what you can make, and in order to have a place to live, you have to make half of what you can make, you're setting up people to basically be at the mercy of these new cops that come in, because as we know, financial struggles or poverty has a correlation to crime.
Yeah.
And when you have more people that can't access a comfortable state of living, I mean, they could do it in various ways, of course, to get roommates. There's a lot of ways they can, circumvent that. But if that's the case to where it's likely still going to go up, that cost of living, you're going to leave more and more people behind, and they will be at the mercy of these new cops that are coming in, that are militarized and trained just like the IDF. And so that's where all of that becomes connected, where this Deacon Hallman's death is just a microcosm of what to expect in a police state.
Yeah. And you see what happened to Tortuguita, who was murdered by the Atlanta Police Department just for peacefully protesting in the forest. So that really was a huge hit as well. So this is one of your next articles, The Terrorist of Yore. I love the way you began this. It says, observing the nuanced history of resistance movements towards liberation. And you did a fake out. You faked me out in the beginning of this article. But here in the beginning, you have Nat Turner's Rebellion on the upper left-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Nelson and Winnie Mandela, part of the ANC that fought against African apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the bottom left, you had the Armed Mississippi Freedom Movement. And then you have the Palestinian Liberation Organization back in 2020. So, but you faked me out, dude. It says in 1948, a white supremacist colonial settler regime engaged in one of the most inhumane styles of governance known as apartheid. From that movement, the indigenous population experienced mass displacement from their homes and intense brutality from their occupier. These natives would develop various forms of resistance, ranging from strictly nonviolent to armed militants. Once the nonviolent actions failed to appeal to the morality of the occupier and was met with indiscriminate violence, the armed resistance would commit acts of violence that would result in the deaths of settler forces and civilians. The largest of these resistance groups was designated as a terrorist organization by the occupiers and their allies, including the United States. It's quite reasonable to assume that I'm referring to Palestinian struggle against Israel. However, I'm actually describing apartheid South Africa. This practice would still be praised and utilized by Israel. So you weren't even talking about Palestinians. You were talking about South Africans.
I didn't even realize how much in common those stories have, even starting around the same time. It's
It's crazy. And so when it comes to the link between actual resistance movements against the occupying force, I forgot somebody. I've heard this saying before: one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
Yeah, that's basically it.
And so it's just like, wait a minute, who occupied the land first? Like, not okay. My question is, who tried to steal the land first? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was on that land living peacefully without any trouble, but then another person comes in to occupy this, take the resources, and then they kill the people who are inhabiting the land. And so then, do those people who were originally inhabiting that land, do they have a right to resist that occupying force? And a lot of people, if you were to ask them just in general, without any precondition of knowing what we're talking about, then a lot of people say, well, of course, right? Because that's your land. Or it's like, can I just bust through the front door of your house and then say, this is my house now?
Apparently some people think you can. So.
Well, those people are typically billionaires, but we don't give a fuck about them. But my thing is, a lot of people would say no. And so, unfortunately, they honestly they would side with the people who are oppressed. But then the moment you put the name Israel to it, then that's when people start to twist their brains and do mental gymnastics and go, well, no, it's not the same, when it is the same.
Yeah, I think a lot of the country, mainly I think a lot of white America, has been conditioned to see rebellions legitimate, unfortunately, solely based off of the race of who is resisting. It's something they gotta grow up out of, but that's up for the white allies to teach them that.
Yep. And so you link those two together very well in this article, and I really encourage people to read that one. And then there was your latest article that you came out with that I wasn't expecting you to come out with. You came out with yesterday, and I was just like, what? You wrote another article? Yesterday? What in the hell? Dude was burning in midnight oil.
Oh, yeah, it was done at midnight. Yeah.
Florida's pathway to build a community-focused economy says bringing North Dakota to Orange County public banks. What are they and how can they serve the community? And you talk about the link to public banks and how it can actually benefit all of us. This was unexpected. And wait, who's that guy there? Wait a minute. Oh my goodness, you actually bring up what me and Mr. Nelson Betancourt were talking about. So was this a subject that really just like caught your attention, that you were like, wait a minute, this is something that we need to talk about more? Like, can you expound on that just for a second?
Yeah. One, I kind of felt like I was a lot of my articles were kind of they had a lot of negative focus. Even though I would try to finish up all of them with some sort of a call to action that's positive, I think a lot of them were negative in genesis. So with the public bank, I remember I was just thinking about it. I was like, I haven't written about anything really like positive. And then I realized that there hasn't been a lot of story coverage on the Orange County actually putting committees together to discuss the establishment of a Orange County public bank. And so I'm like, okay, the type of journalism I want to do, of course, is very much educational based, but I also want to keep up with some topics as well. And so something like that is news that I feel like a lot of people are not actually aware of, like at all, even here in Florida. So when I wrote it, I was like, I'm actually writing about something positive, and it's something that a lot of people don't know about, because I literally would search Orlando's public bank, and of course they have a website, but as far as like articles and different news publications sort of speaking about it, I didn't see any. So I figured let's push it out there. It's literally in our state.
That's awesome. And so, and it's one of the things that I am heartened to see, because the thing is that a lot of times we on the left, we're great at diagnosing the issues. We're great at talking about the problems, but what solutions do we have in order to push and move things forward? And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on also, I wanted to use you as a positive example. People look at what Katie is doing, and look at what he is accomplishing, not just through doing the writing and putting his passion, mixing it with purpose, but also using the skills that he has in order to push forward also positive things. For instance, one of the things that you actually talked about was not just in your talk about the value of voting, not just voting third party, but you were also talking about voting for ballot initiatives and trying to get those out. And so that is something I think that a lot of us need to start to take hold of, is that when we say that we save us, it's not just in whenever we go to protests. Some of the things that we do have to do aren't so sexy, right? It's not like, oh my God, I'm going to be featured in this article for doing this radical action that, catches a lot of eyes. Sometimes the most radical actions are the things that people don't really see.
Yep.
And so I just want to thank you for, also bringing in not just these are our problems, but hey, here's another potential solution that we could look forward to in our future. And so I just want to thank you, dude, for writing about that, because I didn't want to be one of the only people to actually talk about this subject. I like seeing other people talk about some of the similar subjects, especially ones that are more of a positive direction too.
Right. Honestly, I write the way I write. Basically, that comes from my parents. More specifically, my dad. If they're both watching, I don't know if they are, but hey, parents. But when I would talk to my dad about politics, he's very much a guy that needs straightforward solutions and pathways and options. Because I mean, like many people of his mindset, I mean, he sees something wrong, but that's where the political imagination sort of lacks. There's no really sense of what else can we do. So I write and I make sure that I'm answering questions that I would hope he can grasp and understand. And so I generally want to make sure that while I'm informing, I am offering viable, logical solutions that aren't pie in the sky. that are achievable. Almost anything that we want to do is very much achievable. It's just taking the first step to start it, which I think is the hardest part. But once you do it, everything falls in place, especially if you're going the right way and doing the right things on the way. It's yeah, that's my pops right there.
Hey, Pops.
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate you for having me on it to talk about these, and I appreciate you for being a point of inspiration for me stepping into this realm of media. Like I said, I never thought I would do something like this when I first got into politics in general, and I'm grateful for those that I met on the way, which includes you, that got me to this point.
Yeah. And first of all, to your dad, look, you've raised an amazing son, and I am so proud to be working with him. And just to focus on that, because you were talking about how you want to bring solutions to people as far as your work. You're not only doing that as far as the writing. When we meet and we do direct action, for instance, we did the delivering of mutual aid as far as giving toiletries out to the homeless. We're raising money right now for our next mutual aid action that we're doing as well. This just shows that you're not only talking about it, but you're also trying to be the solution in areas so that you can help people who are disenfranchised, especially people among us in our communities.
Right. At the end of the day, the people who are going to save us is us. Let's take the plate instead of accepting the crumbs.
Take the plate. Grab yourself a plate, baby. We're about to cook out. So that's one of the things I wanted to bring out. As far as your Substack, of course, it's in the link in the description below. I also put it in the chat a couple of times already. So if you guys have not subscribed to KD's Substack as well, he does amazing work. I know he's going to come out with something again very soon. It's already probably in the works. He just ain't telling me. So
it is something cooking a little bit.
Yeah. Let the brother cook. Let the brother cook. All right. So he's cooking in the kitchen. So be sure to keep an eye out, subscribe so that you get those email notifications whenever those Substack articles come out. I try to share on my social media whenever I can so that you guys can also see it.